drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission commanded is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston, recapping the Celtics' 98-96 loss to the Indiana Pacers. Has to be a bottom five loss just because of the nature of this being one of the worst teams in the league, record-wise at least. But they didn't have Jaylen Brown. He took the night off dealing with low back spasms. And the Pacers have been turning things around as of late. After losing 13 straight games, Indiana has won back-to-back games, including a blowout game over the Miami Heat. So they still have some guys on that side of the roster that powered their team to the NBA Finals last year. Pascal Siakam hits the game winner over Derek White. We'll talk about that in a moment, but this was one of those games that they had to find ways to put points on the board without Jaylen Brown there, and they just couldn't put up enough points. That's kind of what this came down to. Peyton Pritchard led the way with 23 points on 10 of 22 shooting. I liked what I saw from him in particular in that third quarter, where the Celtics fell behind by double digits after a really tough start to the quarter, and Peyton just came out and found easy baskets. He created for himself and for others, finishes this one with 8 assists and 0 turnovers, which if you've been following this podcast, I talked a couple episodes ago about the importance of not turning the ball over and how that's powered the Celtics to being one of the best offenses in the NBA, if not the best. It's because they don't turn the ball over, and Peyton has really been leading the charge there. So he has a nice game in this one. Derek White always makes an impact, but he was just not able to find his offensive footing. Hits a big shot down the stretch with just 30 seconds to play, 28 seconds to play that ties the game up, but also ultimately misses the game winner at the buzzer. And then there were some nice role player performances that I'll talk about in just a moment. But across the board, you just didn't get enough. You just didn't. And I think when you look at Jaylen Brown being sidelined, obviously no Jason Tatum still, you need more guys to score double figures, or you need somebody to really go off. And you only had one player surpass 20 points, and that was Peyton Pritchard. And so I look at this loss in a couple of ways. For one, this is the first time in nearly a month the Celtics have lost back-to-back games. Last time they did it, it was against the Detroit Pistons and the Milwaukee Bucks. This time it feels kind of similar, where on the first night, they lose to a team that is, okay, it's a really good team. San Antonio Spurs, they're a really good team. Wemby's awesome. Like, they've been the second best team in the Western Conference. And then you think you're going to bounce back against an inferior opponent. This time, the Indiana Pacers. Last time it was the Milwaukee Bucks without Giannis. And instead of bouncing back, and you end up dropping a second game. And people could have freaked out in mid-December and said, oh, they've lost 2 games, and this is the beginning of a worse stretch here. But to be honest with you, I haven't seen anything that indicates that that's where things are headed. They've competed in both of these games. Both of these games came down to the wire. They've now lost 3 of their last 4 games by a combined 11 points. And so on the bright side, because this podcast is all about pulling away the positives, on the bright side, they're right there. I mean, they are literally right there in all of these games. One more stop, one more shot, a better start to the third quarter, a couple more contested threes in that second quarter where Indiana goes off, and they win this game. On the other hand, clutch time execution does matter, and this team is new, and there's a lot of new players on the floor for these key moments. Jordan Walsh was out there, Sam Hauser, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Queta. Those are the 5 that Joe Mosley went with to close this game. But ultimately, you want to see them kind of pull out more of these clutch time victories. And entering today, they've been one of the most efficient shooting teams in the clutch, but they've also been the worst defensive team in the clutch. And I do attribute that to some fouling, some turnovers, and oftentimes having to go small in those moments. And that's given up things on the defensive end. And so that's an open question with this team, is that they've had a lot of clutch time losses. And the thing that I appreciate is that they're in every game. They really are. The only time they've been blown out this year was against the Houston Rockets, and then the Milwaukee game turned into a blowout, that one on December, I think it was 15th. But for the most part, they're in every game. And so that's kind of another positive from this one, is that even on a night where they really didn't have it, they couldn't find a good offensive flow, they didn't shoot the ball well. The Pacers shot the ball much better. Pacers were 16 of 37 from 3, so that's 43%. The Celtics were, pulling up the numbers here, 9 of 35. That's 25.7%. So you're not going to win a lot of games with that kind of shooting disparity. You're not going to win a lot of games when you're down your best player and nobody else kind of takes over the ball game, which in the past we've seen. We saw Derek White go off. We've seen Peyton Pritchard have big games when another player was sidelined. And so Payton had a nice offensive flow there for a stretch, but it wasn't substantive enough, I think, to carry them through the finish line. That's kind of where my thoughts are on this game. So I don't want to overreact because this is the beginning of a 4-game road trip. The Celtics are first playing in Indiana, and then this is my last game covering them from home. I'll be joining the team in Miami tomorrow. Celtics have practice on Wednesday, game on Thursday, and then they are off to Atlanta on Saturday, and then Detroit on Monday. And so we're going to see them have opportunities to play better teams. All three of those teams have been better. The Pistons have been the best team in the East all season long. So they have an opportunity to redeem themselves, but I predicted they'd go 3-1 on this road trip, and I certainly had them winning this one just because, at the end of the day, the Pacers have, they're 9-31, right? So this has been the worst team in the Eastern Conference this season, but it's a reminder that at any given night, any team can go off, and especially this Pacers team, they do have enough talented players. Pascal Siakam is a Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He hits the game winner over Derek White, and that triggered Joe Mazzulla to say illegal screen to every single question that he was asked in his post-game press conference. Regardless of what he was asked, that was his answer, and I think that was indicating that he was not pleased with the fact that on that last play, with about 6 seconds to spare, Siakam took a three-pointer. He was at the three-point line. He screened. He did move a little bit. It was a little bit of a moving pick. Was not called. You can see Joe Mazzulla on the replay pleading to the official for it to be an illegal pick, and Siakam ends up recovering, and Derek White does recover, but he gets a kind of floater off the glass shot to win the game. Ultimately, that was the game winner because Derek was long on a three-pointer on the other end. So I never want to say like when it came down to one player, one call, it was an illegal screen. I have a hard time with illegal screens because I feel like there are so many of them in the NBA. And to be fair, the Celtics haven't gotten away with a lot of illegal screens this year. Queta, Luka Garza, they've been whistled for those. Historically, I think more veteran players like Al Horford, Draymond Green, like they do get away with moving picks. Bam Adebayo, who the Celtics will see on Thursday, he sets some moving screens as well. Like it's just, there are parts of the game that are almost legislated as acceptable, even though in theory they're not. And so I don't know if Joe was specifically talking about just that play or if he was referring to illegal screens kind of throughout the night. He didn't elaborate any further. He literally just said illegal screen, illegal screen, illegal screen. But that's just a noteworthy kind of takeaway from this game is that there was an officiating concern on top of the fact that Jaylen Brown really attributed a lot of his frustration and a lot of his thoughts post-game out on Friday night against the Spurs to the referees, and he got fined $35,000 for that on Monday, and he sat out of Monday night's game, which I didn't realize that was a national TV game. So all that's to say is, big picture, I like that they battled. I like that they were there down the stretch. I like that they put themselves in position to potentially win this one. They were one shot away. And there's the bright side of the clutch time losses, and there's the dark side of it, and that's the fact that at the end of the day, you need to find ways to win these games. But in my experience, like losing clutch time games in January doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose them in the playoffs. And also, right now, these are good reps for players like Jordan Walsh to be out there, Queta to be out there. Like they have not been out there for many pivotal game-winning moments in their NBA career. So at the end of the day, like Derek White is not usually the guy that gets these plays drawn up for him. He had a great play to tie things up with under 30 seconds to play. He has a game winner attempt. Like all of this is good. It's good reps. It's good experience for these guys. This year was supposed to be about player development before the Celtics started winning a bunch of basketball games. And so you want to see them be in this position and compete, right? And I think they continue to show that compete factor. And so that's my big picture takeaway, that again, because they're going to have the opportunity here to respond, I don't want to overreact. If they drop like 3 or 4 on this road trip, we're now kind of seeing them enter slump territory, which that happens, right? That's part of the year. It's part of the season, is that you go through a couple week period where things just are a little bit more difficult and you're losing a little bit more. Every team goes through this stretch. Last year's team around this time was a 500 team for like almost a month. The Oklahoma City Thunder just went through a rut. The New York Knicks went through like a 4 or 5 game losing streak recently. So it happens to teams across the league. Even the Spurs are 5-5 in their last 10 games. So this could be the Celtics' time, mid-season, right, a couple weeks before the All-Star break, a couple weeks before the deadline. Like maybe there's some heightened emotions, heightened pressure. I don't know, but we'll see how it kind of pans out. But I'm never going to extrapolate that they're entering a slump just because they've lost 2 games in a row, especially with how they competed and how both of those games they were fully in position to win. So That's kind of my big picture thought there. I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard, but in life and on PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right. With high pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoop action almost every night, the action never stops. And PrizePicks lets you take control. PrizePicks is so easy to use. And right now, we're in the middle of football season, basketball season. There's so many options of players that you can pick. Missing your fantasy team, my league is already over. I always lose, but with PrizePicks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft to keep playing fantasy. PrizePicks lets you play fantasy football every week, even in the playoffs. Pick your favorite players and win when they hit their projections every week. No draft required. Get in on the action. PrizePicks is now available in all 50 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks now offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. Want to pick more on Steph Curry's 3 points, 3-pointers, and assists? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So I mentioned that, again, it's a clutch time loss. With that, you can draw kind of some points for player development. I do like the fact that despite a disparity in shooting and Jaylen Brown being sidelined, and this Pacers team playing a pretty inspired game, they were in position to kind of come away with this one. The biggest thing that I took away from this game in a positive lens was the Jordan Walsh went back to me to looking more like the Jordan Walsh that started 20 straight games for the Celtics. It almost felt like a early season revelation. He plays 26 minutes in this one, goes 3 of 5 from the field for 6 points, grabs 9 defensive rebounds, 3 steals, has a massive sequence down the stretch where he stole the ball with just over a minute to play. And then on the other end, he finds Peyton Pritchard for an open 3, caught the ball kind of in a weird position under the basket and find Peyton for 3. And that was a huge sequence. That was almost a game-winning sequence. And I would love to see Jordan Walsh back in the starting lineup at some point in the next couple of days here. Whether that's in Miami and giving him the Norman Powell assignment and having him be tasked with somebody that's been a huge bucket getter for the Celtics, or whether it's about making Bam Adebayo's life more miserable. Like, I don't know exactly what assignment he would get, but in general, this is a guy that's shown to be a very versatile defender. And for over a month, for almost 2 months there, Jordan was the guy that they used as the key defensive stopper for opposing teams, and he held up well against a variety of matchups. And so he did go through a little bit of a slump. And it's weird to say slump because for him, it's not about whether you can hit your threes, but it's about the energy that you come in with, about how disciplined you play. Are you crashing the glass? Are you making life difficult for your opponent? Are you a burst of energy off the rip for this team? And so I think with Jordan, what you saw is that pep in his step was a little bit diminished for a stretch. And on the other side, you have somebody like Sam Hauser that can come in and just commands a greater level of attention from defenses. Even if Sam hasn't had the best shooting season, he's around 38% on the year. He commands a level of attention defensively that Jordan just doesn't. Right around the perimeter, it opens things up for other players. And so 20 games, Jordan starts down the street. Towards the end of that, he was playing reduced minutes, so it was kind of clear that he was on his way out potentially. And then since the Clippers game, Sam Hauser's been in the starting lineup. Ugo got the start when Sam was sidelined with, was it a hamstring tightness a couple days ago against the Spurs. And so I don't know if Sam's being perceived as a long-term solution. It's possible. It's also possible that Sam is kind of more of a filler starter because historically he is somebody that Joe Mazzulla has felt comfortable to insert him in the starting lineup rather than tinkering with combinations too much. Like somebody like Anfernee Simons has to start a game this season. Peyton Pritchard last year only started once or twice. Joe really didn't like kind of moving him into the starting lineup. He liked keeping him in that role. So I could see things panning out in different ways, but I generally felt like based off his performance in this game and the fact that Joe did trust him to close, and ultimately Sam closed as well, so it was the two of them. Baylor Shireman got the start in this one, and he had some good moments, but I do think that Jordan kind of gave them an extra dynamic when he was out there, and so I wasn't surprised to see him be in that closing lineup. But I will kind of be keeping my eyes peeled for Thursday to see, does he kind of get that opportunity back? Is he coming back with that extra kind of pop? And at the end of the day, like, it pains me to say this because I really like all of these guys. I like them all as players, as people. Jordan Walsh, Ugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, Josh Minot. There's some overlap in their skill sets. There's some differences too. They've all shot the ball well. They all can defend. Sam Hauser should be in that mix too. That's 5 players that can kind of be playing perimeter minutes. And right now, the reason those minutes exist is because Jason Tatum is sidelined. But if he is to come back in a month or two, which is remains a possibility. I don't know exactly if that's going to happen, but he's just around the 8-month mark for when the Achilles injury was initially suffered. Then you're not going to see minutes for all 5 of those players. Already there aren't enough minutes, right? Josh has been a DNP for a couple weeks now, and he's dealing with an ankle sprain, and already Baylor hasn't gotten a ton of run. Ugo and him have each played around like 11 minutes per game. So it's not like there are a ton of minutes to go around. I am curious if there is a little bit of like figuring out who you're keeping, who's going to stay long term. Obviously, guys are in different contracts. Sam's on by far the most expensive one. Ugo is a rookie. His ceiling is probably highest right now, given his age, his youth, his relative inexperience. So there's a lot of dynamics at play. I don't know if there are players that opposing teams are interested in that they want to see. February 5th is the NBA trade deadline. It's not something that I give a whole lot of thought to because it's so hard to predict. Brad Stevens and the Celtics front office are pretty tight-lipped about those kinds of moves, but ultimately it will be interesting to see if any of those guys get dealt ahead of the deadline as part of another package, if there is interest in them as players. I don't know to what extent, like Jordan Walsh or Ugo or Baylor, like how much demand there is for them in the open market, but wings are always valuable, and these guys are young, and they've all shown promising flashes so far this season, and they're all on cheap deals. And obviously, Sam's the one that if you're trying to cut costs, like his name's floated around a little bit. He's on the first year of a 4-year extension where he's making $10 million this year, and that kind of escalates over the next couple. So he's a name to watch as well. But I was kind of thinking during this game is that everybody's been showcased so far this season, and there might be a little bit of like decision making to be had around who you want to keep, who you're going to further invest in, who is a part of the future. That decision might not be made in the next couple of weeks. It might be made over the summer. But it's also possible that a move does occur before then, and it's likely that one of these young wings would be involved. Like I've seen some rumors around Zubac or Robert Williams or Daniel Gafford. I think it was Chris Mannix that floated some of these names. I know there's a few other reporters that have been floating names as well, and I think it's more conjecture. I haven't seen anything that was like super reported, like the Celtics are heavily considering anything. But if they are to acquire one of these bigs, it's likely that it would come at the cost of one of the young wings. And so I was thinking we might see some clarity there in the coming weeks. And again, I would like to see Jordan, be a part of this team long term because defensively, athletically, I think that he brings them an interesting dynamic. And they do need somebody that can be a lockdown defender. I don't think it's going to be Jaylen Brown on a nightly basis. They don't have Drew Holiday anymore. While Derek's an incredible defender, he plays a more kind of help defender off-ball role, right? And so he's not somebody that you're necessarily going to put on the opposing team's best player. So I like the idea of cultivating Jordan to be that guy, but hey, maybe it's going to be Ugo and they don't think it's going to be Jordan. And so you kind of move on from there. So it's the painful part of the business. It's not the part that I enjoy talking or writing about, to be frank. But it is something that's on my mind, and we'll probably have some coverage about the trade deadline as the weeks approach here, with it just being 3-ish weeks away. So Jordan, I did think was a bright spot. I don't want to turn that into a negative thing. I did think that he really stood out in this one, and I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of regained his spot in the starting lineup after his performance tonight. The last thing I wanted to shout out is Neemias Queta, who quietly has been putting together these really solid performances. 15 points for him, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. He was 7 of 9 from the field. And I just thought he did a lot of nice things out there. He's kind of consistently been a near double-double guy. Left a couple points on the free throw line. He was 1 of 3 from the line, which obviously in this kind of game, I think both of the misses were in the fourth quarter too. So obviously in this kind of game, that hurts. Had 3 turnovers, which is high for someone in his position. But in general, I think the rebounding woes that he dealt with earlier in the year are just so improved. And it's the kind of thing that's not super exciting. It's a little bit boring talking about rebounding, but it's certainly something that is, was super harmful earlier in the year. So it should be praised that he's kind of made tremendous leaps in that regard. Celtics out-rebounded the Pacers by 6 in this game. So rebounding was not the issue. Obviously, on the other side, Jay Huff was awesome in this one. He had 20 points. Siakam was awesome in this one. A lot of guys stepped up and kind of gave them key contributions and key minutes. But ultimately, from my standpoint, Queta played a pretty solid game. And so him and Jordan, I think, were the 2 role players that stood out most to me. Obviously, Peyton Pritchard had a really nice game across the board. I always love if you are a ball handler, you're somebody that has the ball in your hand. I mean, he played 37 minutes and scored 23 points and had 8 assists. To not turn the ball over once all game is huge. And turnovers were an issue for this team. Earlier in the game, they finished with 12, which is just above their season average. So that's no problem. But Peyton kind of has shoulders immense responsibility there. And honestly, I would have liked for him to take one of those final shots. He just had it going more than Derek did tonight. So Derek was 7 of 21 from the field, 2 of 9 from three. You'll live with it because Derek is so good in the clutch. He hit one of his threes in that fourth quarter. He did hit the game tying bucket, but I think Payton gave them some critical contributions across the board. And I almost didn't mention him, but I should mention Anfernee Simons, who had a great first half to allow the Celtics to be up ahead despite Indiana's hot shooting. He finishes this game with 16 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 7 of 15 shooting in just 24 minutes of action. And it's just a classic Anfernee Simons game where he's been efficient. He's provided them a spark of energy. And I think he's just a much better player than he was 3 months ago. And not to bring up the trade deadline again, but he's a name that's been floating out there. It's been a potential guy that might be departing. He's on an expiring $28 million contract. Whether he's here to stay or whether he's here to go, he has certainly raised his value over the last few months and continues to do so in this game against Indiana. So I don't want to sugarcoat it too much. This was one of the worst losses probably of the season. Helps a little bit that Jaylen Brown was sidelined, but you've seen this team pull off wins without Jaylen, without Derek, guys stepping up. You just didn't see enough of that in this one. And then the crunch time execution left a little bit to be desired, but always positive things to be drawn from it. I'm excited to hit the road, see some sun, be in Miami and Atlanta and Detroit, and see if this team can bounce back. So we'll have more coverage from the road over the next couple days here. I'll have You Got Boston podcast after every game. We'll have the Garden Report in full length after every one of these games as well. Check that out. Check all of our podcasts out at CLNS Media. As always, thank you for watching. Let me know what stood out to you from this game. Were there any positive takeaways I missed? I would be surprised because I feel like there wasn't a ton of fun stuff from this one. This was stuff to podcast about, not going to lie. So let me know if I missed something in the comment section. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll be back with more coverage soon.